Philozoopia.
Have you ever had one of those days, you're scrolling through your news feed and you see these just wildly conflicting stories side by side?
Oh, absolutely. All the time.
Or maybe you've seen like an AI-generated image or one of those deep fake videos. It's so convincing, it just makes you stop and think, wait, is this actually real? Can I genuinely trust what I'm seeing? Or, even my own gut feeling about it? It's really easy to feel a bit adrift, right? Bombarded with stuff, not sure what's solid anymore.
It really is. It feels like such a modern problem, doesn't it? This feeling of radical uncertainty, not quite knowing what's authentic.
Yeah.
And yet the fundamental questions at those moments bring up questions about truth, about reality itself, even about who we are at our core. They're not new at all.
Right.
They're questions that echo back centuries, questions that René Descartes wrestled with really intensely in his famous work, Meditations on First Philosophy.
That's exactly it. And today, that's what we're doing, taking a deep dive into that very text. And this isn't just, dusty old philosophy for academics.
Not at all.
It's a really profound journey into the very bedrock of what we can possibly know, what actually exists, and who we fundamentally are. Descartes' ambition, when he sat down to write the Meditations, it was nothing short of revolutionary for his time.
Truly.
He wanted to set up, firm, permanent foundations for the sciences. And crucially, he wasn't looking for theological arguments or relying on what everyone already believed.
Right, he wanted something universal.
Exactly. He was aiming for pure philosophical reasoning, something accessible to anyone willing to really think critically. His big goal was to demonstrate, just using reason, that God exists and that there's a clear difference between the human soul, the mind, and the physical body.
And his own motivation for tackling such a huge project, it's really compelling. He was living in a time of massive intellectual change, maybe a bit like ours in some ways. Old certainties were definitely crumbling. And he genuinely believed that without these foundational truths like a non-deceiving God and a clear grasp of the human mind and how it connects to reality, well, he thought few people would find a solid reason to choose virtue over vice or even bother pursuing knowledge seriously.
That's a powerful thought.
Isn't it? Think about our world right now. You've got alternative facts, incredibly complex ethical choices, and this constant pull towards what's easy over what's right. How do you, personally, figure out what's real, what's the right thing to do, what's actually worth striving for?
Yeah.
Descartes' journey in the Meditations is his attempt to build certainty right from scratch, starting from absolute zero to try and answer those exact questions.
And what's so fascinating, I think, is his method.
Yeah.
It's so radical. He didn't just question a few things here and there.
No, it was systematic.
Totally systematic, almost brutal in a way, this process of doubt. His goal was to strip away every preconceived idea, all the biases, everything he just accepted without really proving it, until he hit something absolutely undeniably true.
It's like clearing a building site, isn't it?
Exactly. Not just tidying up, but demolishing everything right down to the bedrock before you even think about laying a new foundation for, say, a skyscraper. He wanted to reveal veritable demonstrations, truths as solid and certain as like a math proof.
It's an incredible act of intellectual bravery, really, to willingly take apart your entire worldview, hoping to find something truly solid underneath it all.
Absolutely.
So this deep dive is about understanding not just his conclusions, but how he got there. Because that method, that process of critical thinking, that might be his most important legacy for us today.
I agree. So let's get into it. Let's start this intellectual adventure. Section 1, the quest for certainty, embracing radical doubt.
Okay.
So Descartes kicks off his Meditations with this really striking realization he has in his mature age. He looks back and recognizes, quote, how many were the false beliefs that I had from my earliest youth admitted as true, and how doubtful was everything I had since constructed on this basis.
It's a powerful moment, like a midlife crisis for his own knowledge.
Right. Yeah, exactly. An existential crisis of knowledge.
And that realization is such a vital starting point for intellectual growth, right? Not just for a 17th century philosopher, but for any of us today.
For sure.
He got that if the very foundations of what you believe are shaky, then everything you build on top, your worldview, your ethics, your science, it's all unstable too.
Makes sense.
So his massive project was, in his words, to rid myself of all the opinions which I had formerly accepted and commence to build anew from the foundation. He wanted a totally fresh start, a clean slate, to make sure whatever he accepted from then on was absolutely, undeniably solid.
And here's where his method gets really interesting and maybe a bit counterintuitive. He realized he didn't need to painstakingly prove every single one of his old beliefs false.
Right, that would take forever.
He called it an endless undertaking, totally impossible. No, his approach was way more radical. He decided if he could find just one reason to doubt a belief, any reason at all, no matter how small or maybe even far-fetched, that was enough justification to reject it, at least for now.
It's a methodological shift, a powerful one.
It really is. Think about it like checking a crate of apples.
Yeah.
If you find just one apple that's clearly rotten.
You don't trust the whole crate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't need to inspect every single other apple to decide, okay, this batch isn't reliable right now. You just set it aside. His doubt is like a filter, not a wrecking ball for every single idea.
And this is such a profound challenge to our own, mental habits. How often do we just cling to old assumptions or ways of thinking, even when new information pops up that suggests maybe they're wrong?
All the time.
We accept things because, well, it's always been like that, or everyone knows that. Descartes is pushing for this rigorous, systematic, intellectual spring cleaning. He wants us to question even our most basic, unexamined beliefs, not because he's cynical, but because he desperately wants genuine certainty.
So where does he start this cleaning process? What's the most obvious source of most of our beliefs about the world around us?
Our senses, right. What we see, hear, touch.
Exactly, our senses. And he tackles these right away, in a way that's surprisingly easy to grasp. He points out that our senses do sometimes trick us. Especially, he says, concerning things which are hardly perceptible or very far away.
Little things or distant things.
He gives that classic example. Looking at a tall tower from far off, it might look perfectly round, but then you get closer and, oh, wait, it's actually square.
Yeah, a simple, everyday example.
And his immediate conclusion from this, it's pretty practical. It is wiser not to trust entirely to anything by which we have once been deceived. If something's fooled you once, you should be cautious about trusting it completely again.
And wow, does that resonate today, especially with our digital lives? Think how easily our senses, our very idea of what's real, can be manipulated now.
Totally.
Digital filters on photos, AI voices you can't tell from a real person, those deep fake videos that seem to show people saying things they never said.
It's everywhere.
As we're scrolling through our feeds, there's often that little voice asking, is this real? Is this doctored? Can I actually trust what I'm seeing or hearing here? Descartes' point from centuries ago suddenly feels incredibly urgent. How do we know what's real when our main way of perceiving our senses can be messed with so easily? It really forces you to be more discerning, not just passively accepting things.
But Descartes, being Descartes, doesn't just stop there with the occasional trick of the senses. He then dives into something even more unsettling, his famous dream argument.
Ah, yes, the dream argument. Always a mind-bender.
Right. He recalls, how often has it happened to me that in the night I dreamt that I found myself in this particular place, that I was dressed and seated near the fire, whilst in reality I was lying undressed in bed.
We've all had dreams like that, vivid, seemingly real.
Exactly. And the core challenge he throws down is this. There are no certain indications by which we may clearly distinguish wakefulness from sleep. Think about that. He's saying the feelings, the sensations, in a really vivid dream can be absolutely indistinguishable from when you're awake.
Which leads him to this state of, astonishment, as he calls it.
Yeah, and the deeply unsettling thought, maybe I now dream. Right now.
And the implications of that, especially for us today, surrounded by technology, are just huge. If your most vivid, apparently real experiences could just be an elaborate dream.
Then what?
Well, what does that mean for the reality of virtual worlds, or those incredibly immersive video games, or even, highly sophisticated simulations? How do you prove your reality if you can't even be 100% sure you're awake right now?
It's a serious challenge.
It is. It's not just a philosophical game. It forces us to really examine what we mean by real and shows just how fragile our grasp on it might be. It makes you question those assumptions you carry around every day about what's solid.
So, okay, he's cast serious doubt on our senses.
Well, the wake.
And potentially dreaming. Is anything left standing after this? Does anything survive the dream argument?
Well, he pauses to think about that. He notices that even the most bizarre dream images, like sirens, half woman, half fish, or satyrs, half goat, half man, they're still put together from real elements.
How so?
He says they combine members of different animals, or at least the colors of which this is composed are necessarily real. Even if the combination is imaginary, the basic building blocks, like color or shape or the idea of a body part, must come from somewhere real.
Ah, okay, so the raw materials are real, even if the construction is fantastical.
Exactly. And this leads him to a really important distinction. While specific, complicated sensory experiences might be illusions, general things at least, like the idea of eyes, a head, hands, and a whole body, seem to be things really existent, at least in a general category sense.
More fundamental things.
Right. And even more importantly, he finds that certain simpler, more universal concepts and their properties seem to hold true, whether he's awake or asleep. Things like corporeal nature in general and its extension. The idea of space, the figure of extended things, shape, their quantity or magnitude and number, arithmetic, as also the place in which they are, the time which measures their duration, and so on.
So he's moving from specific things we sense to the underlying principles.
Yeah.
Like physics or geometry.
Precisely. He's shifting focus to the universal structures. And this is exactly where mathematics seems to offer a safe harbor, a potential rock of certainty.
Ah, math.
He concludes, whether I am awake or asleep, 2 and 3 together always form 5, and the square can never have more than 4 sides. These kinds of mathematical truths feel absolutely indubitable.
Okay, finally, solid ground, right?
Yeah.
Even if I'm dreaming, 2 plus 3 is still 5. We've found something.
You'd think so. It feels like we've finally nailed down something reliable. But
Right.
just when you think you're safe, just when you think you've found that unshakable foundation.
And there are more.
Oh, yes. Descartes, in his relentless drive for absolute certainty, pushes the doubt one terrifying step further. This is the famous evil demon hypothesis.
The evil demon, right?
He asks, what if? What if there isn't a good God or even just neutral laws of nature, but instead an evil genius, incredibly powerful and cunning, who has dedicated his whole energies in deceiving me?
Wow.
This isn't just about psychoanalysis being unreliable anymore. This malicious demon could be directly manipulating my thoughts, making me believe things that are completely false, even things that seem most certain.
Even the math.
Even the math. He explicitly asks, how do I know that I am not deceived every time that I add 2 and 3 or count the sides of a square? Maybe 2 plus 3 isn't 5, and the demon just makes me think it is every single time.
That's a deeply disturbing thought.
It's a chilling thought experiment, and the sheer audacity of this level of doubt is just incredible. Descartes fully commits to exploring this possibility.
What does he do?
He resolves, just for the sake of the argument, to pretend that all these opinions are entirely false and imaginary. He decides to consider himself as having no hands, no eyes, no flesh, no blood, nor any senses. He's mentally stripping away everything he thought he knew about himself and the world.
But why go so far? What's the point of such extreme, almost paralyzing doubt?
The purpose is absolutely crucial. He stresses he's not considering the question of action, but only of knowledge. He's not saying he's going to stop eating or walking around. This is a purely philosophical exercise, a kind of intellectual purification ritual. He needs to find one single, absolutely unshakable truth, a point zero, upon which he can securely rebuild everything else.
So it's a method to find certainty, not a way to live life.
Exactly. It's the ultimate stress test for any potential truth. How do you find any certainty if you can't trust your senses, your reason, even basic math? This resonates so much today, doesn't it?
Yeah, how so?
Well, think about the spread of deepfakes, or conspiracy theories that posit vast hidden deceptions, or the philosophical anxiety about living in a simulation, like the Matrix. If everything could be a lie, orchestrated by some powerful deceiver, what, if anything, is left? What does your certainty rest on in that kind of scenario? It's a question that forces you to look for the absolute bedrock.
Okay, so after this whirlwind of doubt, throwing out senses, dreams, math, where does that leave Descartes? He must be feeling pretty lost.
Completely lost. He describes it vividly. His mind is filled with so many doubts that it is no longer in my power to forget them. He feels, quote, as if I had all of a sudden fallen into very deep water, completely disoriented, unable to find the bottom or swim to the surface. It's a state of profound intellectual crisis.
So what's his next move? How does he get out of the water?
His new mission becomes really stark, almost desperate. It's all or nothing now. He says, I shall ever follow in this road until I have met with something which is certain, or at least, until I have learned for certain that there is nothing in the world that is certain. He needs to find something solid.
He's looking for that one fixed point.
Precisely. He's searching for what philosophers sometimes call an Archimedean point. You know, Archimedes, the ancient Greek mathematician, said he could move the whole world if someone just gave him one firm, unmovable point in space to place his lever.
Right. Give me a place to stand, and I shall move the earth.
That's the one. Similarly, Descartes, having mentally demolished everything, is desperately searching for one single, undeniable truth. Just one certainty, no matter how small, that he can use as an anchor to start rebuilding all knowledge, his entire intellectual world. He needs an absolute starting point.
Wow. Does he find it?
He does, and this is it. The monumental cogito moment, possibly the most famous single phrase in all of philosophy. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am.
Yes. The big one.
Even if all the things that I see are false, even if that powerful, deceitful demon is doing its worst. Descartes realizes, then without doubt, I exist also if he deceives me, and let him deceive me as much as he will. He can never cause me to be nothing so long as I think that I am something.
Right. Say that again. How does being deceived prove existence?
Because the very act of doubting, the very act of being deceived, requires a subject who is doubting or being deceived. You have to exist in order to be tricked. You can't doubt your own existence without existing to do the doubting.
Okay, I see. The act of thinking itself proves the thinker exists.
Exactly. It's the breakthrough.
Yeah.
The definitive, inescapable conclusion. This proposition, I am, I exist, is necessarily true each time that I pronounce it or that I mentally conceive it. It's self-verifying. The moment you think it, it becomes true for you.
So he knows he exists. But what is this I that exists?
That's his immediate next question. What exactly am I? And he concludes he's not primarily a physical body. The demon could be faking that. He's not an animal in the purely biological sense. Fundamentally, he is a thing which thinks. Res cogitans. That's the one thing the demon cannot fake or take away from him, his consciousness.
And what does he mean by thinking? Is it just logical reasoning?
No, it's much broader than that. The attributes of this thinking thing are really key here. He says it's a thing which doubts, understands, conceives, affirms, denies, wills, refuses, which also imagines and feels.
Wow, so feeling and imagining count as thinking too.
Yes, for Descartes, they are modes of thought. Even if the object of your feeling, like a pain, or your imagination, like a unicorn, doesn't correspond to an external reality, the experience of feeling or imagining is undeniably happening in your mind. It's a mental event, a form of consciousness. That sensation of pain in your foot, even if the foot isn't real, the feeling of pain is a real thought you are having.
That's a really interesting way to define the self, especially today, right? With digital avatars, online personas, our attention pulled everywhere.
Absolutely. Descartes is asking, what's the irreducible, undeniable core of you? Is it your body, your job, your social media profile, your relationships? For him, the bedrock is your capacity to think, in this broad sense, to be conscious, to experience, to doubt, to will. His answer provides this timeless starting point for thinking about self-identity. It suggests that no matter what else changes or is stripped away, your conscious thinking self endures.
Okay, so he's established I think, therefore I am. The thinking mind is the first certainty. But how does this help him know anything about the outside world, or even understand the nature of the mind itself more clearly?
Great question. To solidify this idea that the mind is actually known more clearly and distinctly than the body, and that real understanding goes beyond just what our senses tell us, he introduces another brilliant and famous thought experiment, the wax argument.
The wax. Okay, I've heard of this one.
Right. He asks you to imagine taking a fresh piece of wax, straight from the honeycomb, notice its qualities.
Yeah.
It has specific sensory properties, right?
Yeah, like it smells a bit like honey, maybe flowers,
Yeah.
has a certain color, a shape, a size. It feels hard, cold. If you tap it, it makes a sound.
Exactly. All things you perceive directly through your senses. Now, he says, bring that same piece of wax close to a fire. What happens?
Well, it melts. It loses its shape, gets bigger maybe, becomes liquid hot. The smell changes or disappears. The color changes.
Right.
It won't make a sound if you tap it.
Right. Every single one of those sensory qualities you listed, taste, smell, color, shape, size, hardness, sound, they all change dramatically or vanish completely. Yet, despite this total transformation of all its sensory properties, Descartes asks the crucial question. Does the same wax remain after this change?
Well, yeah, of course. It's still the same piece of wax, just melted.
We must confess that it remains, he says. None would judge otherwise. And this is where the profound insight lies.
Okay, so what's the insight?
The insight is this. What you distinctly knew about the wax, the thing that remained constant through all those changes, could certainly be nothing of all that the senses brought to my notice. Why? Because all the sensory things changed, but the wax itself stayed the same wax.
Ah, so the waxness isn't the smell or the shape or the hardness.
Precisely. So what is it then, if not its shifting sensory qualities? Descartes concludes it's simply a body which, a little while before, appeared to me as perceptible under these forms, and which is now perceptible under others. Fundamentally, it's a certain extended thing which is flexible and movable. It's not the specific collection of sensations, it's an underlying substance that has the potential to take on those different qualities. It's grasped by the mind, not the senses.
Extended, flexible, movable. So properties the mind understands, not just senses.
Exactly. He also points out that our imagination can't really grasp the infinitude of similar changes the wax could undergo. You can't picture every single possible shape or temperature it could have.
Right, that makes sense.
Therefore, he concludes, it is my mind alone which perceives it. Perceiving the wax itself, the enduring substance, isn't a sensory perception. It's an intuition of the mind, an act of understanding. It can be fuzzy or ideally clear and distinct.
He uses an analogy too, right? About looking out a window.
He does. It's a great one. He says when you look out a window and see figures below, you say you see men, but you don't literally see the men themselves. You just see hats and coats, which may cover automatic machines.
You just see clothes, basically.
Right. You judge them to be men based on your understanding. Similarly, you judge the wax to be the same enduring substance, despite its changing appearances. It's your intellect making sense of the sensory data going beyond it.
Okay, that wax argument is actually really powerful when you think about it today. It's like a lesson in critical thinking.
It really is. It's a mental model for looking past the surface. When you encounter a complex issue or a new technology or even interact with a person, are you understanding its essence, what it fundamentally is, its underlying nature, or are you just reacting to its changing superficial features?
Like judging a book by its cover or a news story by its headline.
Exactly. How do you separate what your senses are reporting, which might be fleeting, incomplete, or even manipulated, from what your understanding comprehends, the stable, essential reality? This wax test encourages you to look beyond the immediate sensory input, beyond the filters and the packaging, and try to grasp the core truth of the matter. It's about deeper analysis.
So he's got the I think, therefore I am. He knows his mind exists and understands its nature better than the body, thanks to the wax argument. Where does he go next to build more certainty?
Well, having established the certainty of his own existence as a thinking thing, he needs a reliable rule, a kind of guiding principle to figure out what else he can accept as true. He looks back at the cogito, at that moment of perfect certainty.
The I think, therefore I am.
Right. And he identifies what made it so certain. The fact that he perceived it very clearly and very distinctly. There was no room for doubt, no fuzziness. So he takes this as his guiding light. He concludes, all things which I perceive very clearly and very distinctly are true. This becomes his fundamental rule for building knowledge, his ultimate criterion for truth.
Clear and distinct perception equals truth.
That's the rule. And it's absolutely crucial for him, especially after conjuring up that evil demon. He needs a standard for truth that can withstand even that extreme skepticism. If an idea is so clear and distinct that he simply cannot doubt it while he's considering it, then he reasons it must be true. A non-deceiving God, which he aims to prove next, wouldn't allow him to be fundamentally mistaken about something perceived with such perfect clarity.
Okay, so that rule relies on proving God exists and isn't a deceiver. How does he tackle that? This brings us to Meditation 3, right?
Exactly. Meditation 3 contains his first major argument for God's existence, often called the causal argument or the trademark argument. He starts by carefully categorizing the different kinds of thoughts he finds in his mind.
Okay, what are the categories?
First, there are ideas, which he describes as being like images or pictures of things, the idea of a man, the idea of the sun, the idea of a chimera, just the concepts themselves.
Got it. Ideas.
Second, there are volitions or affections. These are acts of willing, desiring, fearing, affirming, denying. Your mental actions or stances towards ideas.
Okay, feelings and choices about ideas.
And third, there are judgments. This is when you take an idea and you affirm or deny something about it, usually connecting it to reality, like judging that the sun exists outside your mind.
Making claims.
Right. And crucially, Descartes says that truth and falsity, strictly speaking, only apply to judgments. The idea of a mythical creature, a chimera, isn't false in itself as an idea, but the judgment that a chimera actually exists in the world, that could be false.
Okay, that makes sense. Falsity lies in the claim, not the concept.
Precisely. Then he introduces a really important metaphysical principle, a principle of causality that was pretty standard in philosophy back then, though it's debated now.
What's the principle?
He states that there must at least be as much reality in the efficient and total cause as in its effect. Basically, nothing can come from nothing, and something more perfect or having more reality cannot arise from something less perfect or with less reality.
Okay. Can you give an example?
Think of a sculptor making a statue. The cause, the sculpture and the marble, must contain in some way at least as much reality as the effect, the finished statue. You can't get a complex statue from, say, just dust. And critically, he says, what is more perfect cannot proceed from the less perfect. This applies not just to actually existing things, what he calls formal reality, but also to the representational content of ideas, what he calls objective reality.
Objective reality. So the reality of the idea itself.
Sort of. It's the reality represented by the idea. The idea of a very complex machine has more objective reality than the idea of a simple stone because the machine it represents is more complex. And this objective reality, the conceptual content, must have a cause with at least as much formal reality, actual existence and perfection. The cause must be adequate to the effect, even when the effect is just an idea in the mind.
Okay, that's a bit complex, but I think I follow. The cause needs to be big enough for the idea it produces.
That's a good way to put it. So with this causal principle ready, Descartes turns his gaze inward, examining the ideas he finds within his own mind, and he lands on one very special idea, the idea of God. He has this idea of God as a substance that is infinite, eternal, immutable, all-knowing, all-powerful, and by which I, myself, and everything else have been created. It's the idea of a supremely perfect being.
The standard attributes.
Right. And now he applies his causal principle to this specific idea.
Okay, how does that work?
This is the core of the argument. Descartes knows he is finite, imperfect, he doubts, he desires, he lacks knowledge. He clearly lacks many of the perfections contained within his idea of God. Therefore, he reasons he cannot possibly be the sole cause of this idea of an infinite and supremely perfect being. A finite, imperfect cause himself cannot produce an idea with the infinite objective reality of God.
Because the effect, the idea of infinite perfection, would be greater than the cause,
Right.
his own finite mind.
Exactly. The cause must have at least as much formal reality as the idea has objective reality. So the cause of his idea of God must itself be an actually infinite and perfect being. It cannot have originated only from him.
Could have come from somewhere else? Like maybe you just combined ideas he already had.
He considers that. Could he have gotten the idea of infinity just by negating finitude? He says no, the idea of the infinite is somehow more primary, more positive than the idea of the finite, which he understands mainly by its limits. Could he be potentially perfect, and that's enough? No, the idea is of an actually infinite being. Could he have created himself? If he could, he argues, he would have given himself all perfections and would be God. Could it come from his parents or a combination of lesser causes? No, because the idea of God involves a unified, inseparable perfection that couldn't arise from fragmented or imperfect sources.
So he rules out all other options, leaving only one possibility.
Right. His conclusion, derived purely through this chain of causal reasoning about the origin of the idea in his mind, is that God necessarily exists. This argument is absolutely vital for him. It grounds all future knowledge claims in a supremely perfect being who, being perfect, cannot be a deceiver. If God exists and is good, then the evil demon is banished and the clear and distinct rule for truth becomes reliable.
That's a fascinating argument. It's all based on analyzing the idea of God found within his own mind.
Precisely. And while it was hugely influential, it also raises deep philosophical questions still debated today about necessary existence, about applying causality to ideas, about the origin of concepts like infinity and perfection. Even if you don't buy the conclusion, wrestling with the logic of the argument, how he tries to move from an inner mental state to an external reality, is incredibly valuable. It forces you to think hard about where our most profound ideas actually come from.
He also calls this idea of God innate, right? Like it was planted there.
Yes, he concludes, it must be innate in me, just as the idea of myself is innate in me. It wasn't learned from experience. It wasn't invented by him. It's part of the fundamental furniture of his mind. He uses that lovely analogy of the mark of the workman imprinted on his work.
Like a signature.
Exactly, as if God, in creating him, left this idea of himself stamped onto Descartes' mind. And this innate idea implies not just God's existence, but crucially, his non-deceiving nature. Because, as Descartes argues, fraud and deception necessarily proceed from some defect. A supremely perfect being has no defects, therefore God cannot be a deceiver.
And that divine guarantee is what finally allows him to trust his clear and distinct perceptions and move forward.
That's the key. It unlocks the door out of radical skepticism, and it immediately sets up the next big puzzle he needs to solve. If a perfect, non-deceiving God created us, why on earth do we make so many mistakes? Why are we so prone to error?
Ah, the paradox of error. Okay, so we've got God established as supremely good, definitely not a deceiver, the ultimate guarantor of truth when we perceive things clearly.
Right. Solid foundation established.
But this leads straight into that huge, very human paradox. If God made us and God is perfect and doesn't deceive, then our ability to judge, the intellectual equipment he gave us, shouldn't lead us into error if we just use it correctly. I write, as Descartes says.
Seems logical.
And yet, as he points out, humans are clearly subject to an infinitude of errors.
We mess up constantly. So how can a perfect creator make such error-prone creatures? It feels like a contradiction.
It's a classic theological and philosophical problem, isn't it? And Descartes' answer, his way of resolving this paradox, is really insightful. I think it offers a powerful way to understand our own everyday blunders.
Okay, what's his solution?
He argues that error isn't a thing, not a positive faculty or power that God gave us. It's not something we have. Instead, error is a defect, a privation. It's a lack of knowledge or perfection where maybe it seems like we should have it, or where we want it.
So error is an absence, not a presence.
Exactly. And he traces this lack, this tendency towards error, to a combination of two causes within us. Our faculty of knowing, which he calls the understanding, and our faculty of choosing, our free will, which he simply calls the will. It's the interplay or maybe the mismatch between these two that leads us into error.
Okay, understanding and will. Let's break those down. What's the understanding? The understanding, or intellect, is the faculty that perceives ideas. It just takes them in, apprehends concepts. Think of it like the mind's eye. It just sees or grasps the ideas presented to it. Crucially, he says, it neither asserts nor denies anything. It just presents information.
So the understanding itself can't be wrong.
Not in itself. According to Descartes, whatever the understanding perceives clearly and distinctly, it perceives truly as I ought. If your perception is genuinely clear and distinct, it's accurate. The problem isn't the understanding's accuracy when it does perceive clearly, but rather its scope. He admits the understanding is of very small extent and extremely limited. Our intellect can only clearly grasp a tiny fraction of reality at any one time.
Okay, so the understanding is limited but accurate when clear. What about the will?
The will. That's a different story entirely. The will, or the faculty of free choice, is much wider in its range and compass than the understanding. In fact, Descartes finds the will so great in me that I can conceive no other idea to be more great. It's practically infinite in its scope.
Infinite. How so?
In the sense that we can choose to affirm or deny, pursue or avoid, anything presented to us by the understanding, or even things not presented clearly. He sees this vast freedom of the will as the very thing that makes us bear the image and similitude of God. It's our capacity for limitless choice.
Okay, so the understanding is limited, but the will is almost unlimited. Where does the error come in?
The error comes precisely from this mismatch. Because the will is so vast and impatient, we do not restrain it within the same bounds as our limited understanding. We extend it also to things which I do not understand. We make judgments, we affirm or deny things, even when our understanding hasn't given us a clear and distinct perception of the matter.
We jump to conclusions.
Exactly. And as the will is of itself indifferent to these, meaning when the understanding is unclear, the will has no compelling reason to choose one way or the other. It easily falls into error and sin and chooses the evil for the good or the false for the true. Our expansive will outruns our limited intellect, and we assent to ideas that are false or pursue goals that are bad simply because we haven't understood them properly first.
He talks about indifference being the lowest form of freedom, right?
Yes. That feeling of being able to choose A or B simply because there's no clear reason for either, that's indifference, the lowest grade of liberty. True freedom, for Descartes, paradoxically arises when the understanding does perceive the truth or the good with perfect clarity.
How is that freedom? Doesn't clarity compel the will?
It does, but for Descartes, being effortlessly and naturally drawn to the true and the good because you understand it perfectly is the highest form of freedom. You're no longer acting out of ignorance or indifference, but out of clear-sighted knowledge. The choice becomes easy, natural, and perfectly aligned with reason. The constraint comes from the truth itself, not from external force.
Okay, that's a subtle point. So if God is perfect, why didn't he just give us a perfect, unlimited understanding to match our unlimited will? Then we wouldn't make mistakes.
Descartes tackles this head-on. He argues essentially that it's proper to the finite understanding not to comprehend a multitude of things. A created understanding, by definition, must be finite. God wasn't obligated to give us all perfections. There's no reason to complain about not being God ourselves.
Fair enough.
And as for the will being wider than the understanding, he sees the will as indivisible. You can't really have half a free will. Its comprehensive nature is part of the gift. God concurs with our acts of will, since he sustains everything, and those acts are good insofar as they come from God. But the privation, the error, the lack in the judgment, that doesn't need God's concurrence because it's not a positive reality, it's an absence, a negation, like a shadow is an absence of light.
He even suggests that maybe imperfection adds to the perfection of the whole universe.
He does float that idea. I cannot deny that in some sense it is a greater perfection in the whole universe, that certain parts should not be exempt from error, as others are, than that all parts should be exactly similar. Maybe our capacity for error contributes to the overall diversity and richness of creation. It's a fascinating, almost aesthetic justification for imperfection.
So given this diagnosis, error comes from the will overstepping the understanding. What's his remedy? How do we avoid mistakes?
This leads directly to perhaps his most practical advice, something incredibly relevant for you, the listener, trying to navigate today's world. He states the remedy clearly. I should abstain from giving my judgment on anything when I do not perceive it with sufficient clearness and distinctness.
Hold back judgment until you're sure.
Precisely. The fundamental rule, the practical application of this whole analysis is that the knowledge of the understanding should always precede the determination of the will. Simple, but profound. Don't make up your mind, don't assent, don't act until you genuinely understand.
Wow. That feels incredibly relevant to modern life, doesn't it? Especially with social media and the 24/7 news cycle.
Absolutely. Think about it. How often do we form judgments, hit like, share an article, jump into an argument, make a decision without truly understanding the topic clearly and distinctly? There's this constant pressure, this impulse to react before we fully comprehend.
The rush to judgment.
Exactly. Descartes' framework explains why we fall into error so often, even when we mean well. It's usually not malice. It's our broad, eager, impatient will leaping ahead of our limited, often lazy understanding.
So his solution is basically intellectual discipline,
Mm.
patience.
Yes. A profound call for intellectual humility and patient discernment. He even suggests we need to practice this. By attentive and frequently repeated meditation, impress it so forcibly on my memory that I shall never fail to recollect it whenever I have need of it, and thus acquire the habit of never going astray. It's about building a habit of suspending judgment.
So it's not about being indecisive, but about being diligent.
Precisely. Take the time for that attentive and frequently repeated meditation. Really think things through before you commit your will, before you assent to something as true just because it seems plausible or fits your existing beliefs or feels urgent. This methodical approach, this disciplined assent, is a vital tool for information literacy, for critical thinking, in an age flooded with potentially misleading information. It's really a blueprint for thinking well.
Okay, so he's established himself as a thinking thing, proved God exists and isn't a deceiver, and explained how error arises from misusing our free will. What's left? Does he get back to the physical world?
Yes, that's the next major step. Having secured the reliability of his own mind and the existence of a trustworthy God, he turns back to the question of material things. Can we know for certain that the external physical world exists, and what can we know about it?
How does he approach this?
He starts by looking again at ideas that seem to have a kind of independent reality, what he calls true and immutable natures. He finds these primarily in mathematical and geometrical ideas, concepts like quantity, extension, taking up space, figure, shape, number, movement, duration.
They seem pretty abstract.
They are, but he argues they aren't things he just invents in his mind. They have inherent properties that he discovers, properties that are true and immutable. His classic example is the triangle.
Right, the triangle again.
When you think of a triangle, you immediately grasp certain necessary properties. It must have 3 sides. Its internal angles must add up to 2 right angles, 180 degrees. He argues this isn't something he decides. It's inherent in the very nature, the essence of triangleness. These properties exist independently of his thinking about them, almost like Platonic forms. He's apprehending an objective structure.
Okay, so mathematical objects have these eternal truths attached to them. How does this relate to God or the physical world?
Well, this leads him directly into a second, very different and perhaps more famous proof for God's existence found in Meditation V. It's often called the ontological argument.
Ontological, based on being.
Exactly. He argues that existence itself can be considered a perfection, a property, just like having angles sum to 180 degrees is a property of a triangle. And just as the concept of a triangle necessarily includes its essential properties, the concept of God defined as a supremely perfect being necessarily includes the perfection of existence.
Whoa, hang on. So just because the idea of God includes existence, that means God must exist.
That's the crux of it. He argues you cannot conceive of a supremely perfect being that lacks existence, because lacking existence would be an imperfection. It would be like trying to conceive of a mountain that doesn't have a valley. The concepts are inseparable.
But I can conceive of a unicorn, which includes having a horn, but that doesn't mean unicorns exist.
Descartes anticipates this objection. He says it's different for God. God isn't just any concept. God is the concept of supreme perfection, containing all perfections. And existence, he argues, is perfection. Therefore, unlike the contingent properties of a unicorn, existence is part of God's very essence. It's not his thought imposing necessity on God. Rather, it's the inherent necessity which lies in the thing itself. God's supremely perfect nature that determines his thought and makes God's non-existence inconceivable.
Okay, that's a dense one. Why is this second proof important for him?
It's crucial because it reinforces the certainty of God's existence from a different angle. And he then makes a very strong claim. The certainty and truth of all other knowledge, even seemingly obvious things like geometry, ultimately depends on knowing this true, necessarily existing, non-deceiving God. Only with that divine guarantee can he be absolutely sure the evil demon isn't tricking him about math or anything else, especially when he's not actively focusing on the proof. God becomes the ultimate anchor for all reliable knowledge.
Okay. So God exists, guarantees truth. Now, finally, back to physical things.
Yes. Now he makes a key distinction that helps bridge the gap to the material world. The difference between imagination and pure intellection, or understanding.
Imagination versus understanding. What's the difference for him?
Imagination, he says, involves picturing things, forming mental images. It's a certain application of the faculty of knowledge to the body which is immediately present to it, and it requires a particular effort of mind. When you imagine a triangle, you conjure up a visual image, perhaps with specific dimensions.
Okay, mental pictures.
Pure intellection, or understanding, on the other hand, is grasping something clearly and distinctly without necessarily forming a sensory image. His example is the chiliagon, a figure with 1,000 sides.
Right, you mentioned that. Hard to picture.
Exactly. You can understand perfectly well what a chiliagon is, know its properties mathematically, but you simply cannot form a distinct mental image of all 1,000 sides simultaneously, the way you can with a triangle or a pentagon.
So understanding doesn't need pictures. Why is this distinction important?
It's significant because he argues that imagination is not essential to his nature as a thinking thing. He could exist as a mind without the ability to imagine. Therefore, imagination seems to depend on something which differs from me, something non-mental. It strongly suggests the existence of a body, something physical that the mind interacts with when it imagines. Imagination points towards the probable existence of material things.
So the way imagination works hints at a physical world it's connected to.
That's the inference he draws. So now, with God's existence and non-deceiving nature firmly established, he revisits all those beliefs about the physical world he got from his senses, having a body, feeling pleasure and pain, hunger, thirst, seeing colors, hearing sounds, feeling textures. He had thrown all these into doubt earlier.
Right, because senses can deceive, and he might be dreaming.
Exactly. But now, with God secured as a non-deceiver, his reasoning changes. He argues, since God gave him a very great inclination to believe that his ideas of physical objects, like trees, rocks, other people, actually come from those physical objects, and since God is not a deceiver,
Then those objects must really exist.
hence we must allow that corporeal things exist. God wouldn't plant such a strong natural inclination in us if it were fundamentally false. That would be deceptive. However, and this is a really important qualification, that they exist, but perhaps not exactly what we perceive by the senses, since this comprehension by the senses is in many instances very obscure and confused.
So the physical world exists, but our senses might not give us the full or accurate picture.
Precisely. Only the properties he can perceive clearly and distinctly, the mathematical ones like extension, figure, size, motion, duration, can be known with certainty about material things. The secondary qualities, like color, sound, taste, smell, are more subjective, more confused, perhaps more about how things affect us than what they are in themselves.
That's a crucial distinction for science, and just for understanding our own perception. We tend to assume what we see is reality.
We do, and Descartes forces us to see how much interpretation and judgment goes into it. It prompts you to ask, how do I separate my subjective experience of something from its objective reality? This is vital when we talk about objective truth in any field, art, ethics, even science. What parts of my perception are the clear, distinct, measurable aspects, and what parts are more obscure, subjective, or potentially misleading?
Okay, so material things exist, but we mainly know their mathematical properties clearly. What about the connection between our specific material thing, our body, and our mind?
Ugh, the mind-body problem. He tackles this directly in Meditation 6, offering one of the most famous descriptions of their intimate union. He says emphatically, I am not only lodged in my body as a pilot in a vessel,
Right, not just a ghost driving a machine.
but that I am very closely united to it, and so to speak, so intermingled with it that I seem to compose with it one whole. He insists on a much deeper, more intimate connection than just a mind controlling a separate body.
What's his argument for this deep intermingling?
It comes back to sensations like pain, hunger, and thirst. If he were just a pilot in a ship, a mind in a body, he argues, he would perceive damage to the ship, the body, purely intellectually. He'd understand that the body needs food or has been injured, like a captain reading gauges, but he wouldn't feel hunger or feel pain.
But we do feel those things directly.
Exactly. He says these feelings, hunger, thirst, pain, pleasure, are not pure thoughts or pure physical events. They are certain confused modes of thought which are produced by the union and apparent intermingling of mind and body. They arise specifically from this union, and their purpose, he concludes, is fundamentally practical. Nature teaches us through these sensations to flee from things which cause the sensation of pain and seek after the things which communicate to me the sentiment of pleasure. There for self-preservation, for the conservation of the combined mind-body unit.
These are survival signals.
Primarily, yes. Not necessarily sources of objective truth about the world, but vital signals for navigating it and keeping the body functioning.
But this leads to another problem, doesn't it? If these sensations are from nature, and ultimately God, how can they sometimes mislead us? He gives that example of the dropsical patient.
Yes, the person with dropsy, severe edema or swelling, they might feel incredibly thirsty, a powerful natural sensation, even though drinking more water would actually be harmful, possibly fatal for them. This seems like nature, and therefore God, deceiving them about what's good for the body. How does this fit with a non-deceiving God?
It seems like a direct contradiction to his earlier points.
It does, and his solution is ingenious, using another analogy. The badly made clock. Think of the human body as a complex machine, like a clock, designed by God to function according to certain natural laws. Now, even if a clock is faulty or badly made, it still operates according to its own mechanical principles, even if the result, the time it shows, is wrong and fails its intended purpose.
Okay.
Similarly, the body, as a machine, continues to operate according to its established physiological laws, even when disease or damage makes those normal operations lead to a harmful outcome, like the thirst mechanism firing inappropriately in the dropsical patient. The system is generally reliable for its main purpose, conservation, but it's not foolproof in every single specific instance. God set up the general laws, which usually work for our benefit.
So the thirst signal usually means drink water, which is good. But in this disease state, the same signal leads to harm because the underlying machine is broken.
Exactly. He argues that a particular brain state typically corresponds to one sensation, like pain in the foot. And since that brain state is most often caused by actual foot injury, it's reasonable, natural for it to produce that sensation, even if, rarely, the brain state is caused by something else further up the nerve. God's design is for the general good and overall conservation of the system, based on statistical likelihood, not for infallible accuracy in every single case, or for giving us abstract truth through sensations. Sensations are practical guides, not perfect reports.
That whole mind-body connection and how physical states relate to subjective feelings. It's still a massive topic in neuroscience and philosophy today, isn't it?
Absolutely central. How does consciousness emerge from physical stuff? How do brain events cause subjective experiences? Descartes' framework, even if we don't accept all of it, still sets the stage. And his thoughts on the purpose of sensations and emotions, are they for survival or for finding truth? When should we trust our gut feelings, our natural inclinations, and when might they be misleading us due to a faulty mechanism or a misinterpretation of the signal? These are all still very live questions.
So after exploring mind, God, error, the physical world, and the mind-body union, does he finally solve the dream problem? How can he be sure he's awake now?
He does return to it, offering a practical criterion. The key difference, he concludes, lies in coherence and memory. He says, our memory can never connect our dreams one with the other or with the whole course of our lives, as it unites events which happen to us while we are awake.
So dreams are fragmented, but waking life fits together.
Right. In waking life, our perceptions are generally consistent. They connect to a specific place from which they proceed, and that in which they are, and the time at which they appeared to me. They form a continuous, coherent narrative linked to our past experiences and our understanding of the world. Dreams usually lack this robust connection and consistency.
So if everything checks out, senses, memory, understanding, all fitting together without contradiction.
Then, he says, I ought in no wise to doubt the truth of such matters. That coherence is the practical sign that he's not dreaming. He does add a final note of humility, though, acknowledging the infirmity of our nature. He admits that the exigencies of action often oblige us to make up our minds before having leisure to examine matters carefully, meaning we still make plenty of errors in everyday life due to time pressure and lack of attention, even with this criterion available.
That emphasis on coherence, on connecting things with the whole course of our lives, feels like another really valuable takeaway for today.
Definitely. In a world overflowing with fragmented information, clickbait headlines, and short attention spans, Descartes' call to look for coherence, to build a consistent narrative of reality from all the different inputs, is a powerful tool. It urges us not just to react to isolated bits of data, but to actively check for consistency, continuity, and logical connections across everything we experience and learn. It's a pragmatic strategy for trying to discern reality in the everyday flow of information.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've really followed Descartes on an incredible intellectual journey. Quite a roller coaster.
It really is. He starts from this place of absolute radical doubt, questioning literally everything, senses, dreams, even math, systematically clearing the ground, searching for just one unshakable point.
And he finds it in his own existence as he thinking of being the famous cogito, I think, therefore I am. That becomes his Archimedean point.
Exactly. From that bedrock of self-awareness, using his causal principle, he argues his way up to the existence of a supremely perfect and therefore non-deceiving God. This divine guarantor is the key that unlocks everything else.
Right, because with a non-deceiving God, he can finally trust his clear and distinct perceptions, banish the evil demon, and move beyond skepticism to accept the reality of a material world, though a world we grasp best through its mathematical properties, not just our often confused senses.
And his analysis of why we make mistakes, that brilliant explanation of human error stemming from the mismatch between our limited understanding and our boundless, impatient free will, that offers such a timeless insight into our own fallibility.
With that powerful remedy, discipline your will. Only assent to what you clearly and distinctly understand. A call for intellectual humility and patience.
It truly is. And it makes Descartes' work so much more than just a historical curiosity. He really did lay down much of the groundwork for modern science, for mathematics, and for critical thinking as we understand it today. His method of doubt, his focus on clarity and distinctness, his deep analysis of mind, body, God, and error, these are still profoundly relevant.
So philosophy, the way he practiced it anyway, gives us these essential tools, doesn't it? Tools for self-examination, for questioning assumptions, for building knowledge carefully, and for understanding how we perceive and judge in a world that often seems designed to confuse us.
Absolutely. It's not about telling you what to think, but offering rigorous methods for how to think more clearly, more critically, more reliably, a kind of shortcut to being well-informed by improving your thinking process itself.
Now, Descartes, as we saw, concluded pretty emphatically that the certainty and truth of all knowledge depends alone on the knowledge of the true God. His entire system, from the reality of the external world to the reliability of math, ultimately balanced on that theological cornerstone.
It did. God was the ultimate guarantor.
So here's a final thought for you, the listener. If we, as many people do today, choose to remove that theological foundation, if we set aside the proof of a non-deceiving God as the ultimate anchor, what then does your certainty depend on? In our complex, often secular, information-drenched world, what are the new foundations you rely on to tell truth from falsehood, to build your understanding of reality, and to really grasp who you are? And maybe more unsettlingly, what are the implications if those foundations aren't quite as clear and distinct as you might assume?
That's the question Descartes leaves us with, echoing down the centuries. What holds up your world?
Philozoopia.